Good morning. Happy Mother's Day, ladies. We do very much appreciate you. We would be thrilled if you would stay afterwards for the meal. I appreciate the men that are substitutionarily cooking while I cannot be back there this morning. And when you eat of the meal, you're going to appreciate their substitutionary cooking also. We do need to have a very quick VBS meeting, so as soon as church is over, if you could just stay here for a second. We have some things we need to decide about Vacation Bible School, and then we'll run back and eat, okay? And do it really quickly. The smell of food by then will be permeating, and everybody will be like, let's hurry up and get this done so we can go eat. Mother's Day, wonderful time, and I spent a little bit of time this week looking up some quotes and some proverbs about mothers, and was thinking about studying Proverbs 31, and I know it's mostly about a wife, but it talks about the fantastic character of a lady, and there are definitely some important things in there about mothers. But this morning I want to look at some proverbs from the Bible also, what a mother means to us and why. First of all, a couple quotes. My mother was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. All I am, I owe to my mother. I attribute all my success in life to the moral, intellectual, and physical education I received from her. George Washington. Mother is the name for God on the lips and in the hearts of little children. William M. Thackeray. Now, the first time I read this, I thought, oh, that's almost blasphemous. But then when you think about who Thackeray is and where he's coming from, what he is simply saying is the closest thing that a young child can picture to who God would be mom. And that's a pretty powerful statement if you think about it. Last one, Oliver Wendell Holmes. The real religion of the world comes from women much more than from men, from mothers most of all, who carry the key of our souls in their bosoms. And I think it's because of the close personal relationship that mothers and children have. Sometimes God uses things in this world to picture other relationships. And you look at the union between a husband and a wife we call marriage, and he says the same thing happens between Christ and his church. And you want to picture the love of God to somebody, and a lot of times you think of the self-sacrificing love of a mother. 3 proverbs I want to share with you. Jewish proverb, a mother understands what a child does not say. I like that. It's because they're so in tune with them. Irish proverb, a man loves his sweetheart the most, his wife the best, but his mother the longest. A Spanish proverb, an ounce of mother is worth a pound of clergy. Boy, that's true. I mean, there are a lot of folks who've come to Jesus Christ because of the influence of a mother. But for the message this morning, I want to share with you some biblical proverbs. What does the Bible have to say? I mean, you can look at a Jewish proverb or a Spanish proverb or an Irish proverb, but what does God have to say about it? Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 8 for our reading this morning, and then we'll bow for a word of prayer. Proverbs chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For thou shalt be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, we are grateful for mothers. We are grateful for the godly influences that they have been in our lives. And if we have had the blessing of growing up in a Christian home with a godly mother, all of the days of our life, we will be blessed because of it. Thank you for the godly heart heritage that can start at any time when someone chooses to give their life to Jesus Christ and to serve him wholeheartedly. I pray that you would touch our hearts with appreciation and thanksgiving for the sacrifice that they have made, for the sacrifice that you have made, for the shed blood of your Son, Jesus Christ, on the cross of Calvary. Self-sacrificing love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We are going to end in Proverbs chapter 1, but I want you to turn to Proverbs chapter 31 as we get started this morning. It's kind of interesting to me that we're going to start this book on wisdom and understanding and knowledge, and he starts it very similarly in Proverbs chapter 1, and he's going to end it very similarly in Proverbs chapter 31. And the first couple of verses here, he is going to deal with a mother talking to her child, and then it's going to give some instruction about a godly woman, and I don't think that those two things joined together in the same chapter are a mistake. Let's look at verse 1. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his, notice it doesn't say pastor, doesn't even say Sunday school teacher or Awana teacher or kindergarten teacher or high school teacher. He says the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. Our verse for this month is Proverbs 1:8. Forsake not the law of thy mother. What an important statement. And here we're going to see it repeated again because he says, my mom taught me some really, really important things. Now, the interesting thing is I looked up this word teaching because I thought, well, what all does it involve? And sometimes different words are used in different contexts. And what I found was kind of shocking because this same word can be used to mean chastise, correct, instruct, reform, reprove. Now, that's pretty incredible because when you stop and you think about it, all of those things are involved in the teaching process, and all of those things are an important part of motherhood. And so basically what he's saying here is, listen, mom's not just acting like a mom when she bakes me chocolate chip cookies or tucks me in at night or gives me a couple of dollars to go and get ice cream or candy or whatever, as a treat. Mom is also a mom when she's beating my hind end with a wooden spoon or a paddle because I haven't been behaving properly. And I know, ladies, that is a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing for fathers to do, but it's a very, very important part of being a parent. The teaching. He says, the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that my mother taught me. Now, King Lemuel, this is an important feller. He is an older man. He has a job, if you will, a career. And he's going back and he's not saying, I have some wise counselors that have been teaching me as I've been king. He's going back and saying, this is the influence my mom had on me. In other words, this is why I am where I am. Verse 2. This is a very interesting verse, and at first glance I thought, this is kind of weird that it's in here this way. It's from the mother's perspective. What, my son, and what the son of my womb, and what the son of my vows. We see the concern of a mother here. Let me put it in a modern English for you. She basically says, what are you doing? Have I not taught you better? I am going to correct you, and I expect you to take it well. You say, how do you get all that from this? Because it's going to start right here, and she's going to start in verse 3 and go down through, and she's going to openly rebuke him. And the expectation is, listen, I am your mother, and I know you're the king, and I know because you're the king you have authority over me, but I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you like it is, and there might not be anybody else in the world that's going to tell you like it is, but you're my son, so here it is. Thank God for mothers that can get in the face of their youngster and do their best to set them right when everybody else just tells them what they want to hear. Incredible verse. Look at the advice she's going to give him in verses 3 through 5. Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. Listen, you need to have good relationships. You need to have good relationships. Why in the world are you running around? Don't you understand, King, that you need to be careful of fleshly lust? Now, how many times have you heard somebody say, oh, he's just running around sowing his wild oats? And it's almost like you make that statement as if it's okay that they run around and sow wild oats. Do you not realize that we could turn to another place in Proverbs and it says what you sow is what you... Well, why would you want your child to reap wild oats? Let's put it a different way. They're just going to go roll around in poison ivy for a little bit. It's not like it could hurt them. And you look at that and you say, that's goofy. I mean, what mother would do that? They're just going to play with a hornet's nest a little bit. I mean, he's way bigger than the hornets are. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Now, I can see a kid saying that, right? I said that a lot of times when I was growing up. You sure you want to do that? What could go wrong? You want a list? But mom and dad standing there watching something bad about to happen, you just don't say, hey, this person's going to go and sow their wild oats. And here's a king. And mom's willing to step in and say, what are you doing? I taught you better than that. Do you not realize that this is the kind of behavior that can destroy a king? Have some self-control in verses 4 and 5. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. In other words, she says, drinking distorts the thinking. And your job is to be a judge of the folks. So if you've been drinking, how can you possibly be a good king? Make good decisions. Boy, I tell teenagers this all the time. Man, when you're a teenager, you think you're bulletproof. You can run around, do this and this and this and this and this. And sometimes they look at you and say, well, are you telling me that parents don't forgive and that God doesn't forgive? Well, yeah, you can live in mercy and grace all you want to, but that doesn't excuse you from the consequences of those decisions. You have an accident and lose a leg, God doesn't, regrow the leg for you when you're forgiven. You can be forgiven, but you have to live the rest of your life without that leg. Here's a mom who sees her son making poor decisions and says, you are in an important position that affects the health and the well-being of others. Make good decisions, King Lemuel. Come on, I taught you better than that. In verses 6 through 9, she's going to give him some encouragement. She says, give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. You are better than that, is basically what she's telling him. I mean, somebody who is absolutely desperate and they don't know where else to turn, I can understand that they would start doing this. But you're better than that. I raised you better than that. Verse 8, help those that need it. Open thy mouth for the dumb and the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Man, you could be sitting up there judging the nation of Israel, and you could be drunk and not making a wise decision, when actually you should be helping those that are there because they desperately need it. Be a good man, King Lemuel. Step up and make the most of the opportunity that God's given you. That's the encouragement. Do your work well. Look at verse 9. Open thy mouth, judge righteously. Don't just judge haphazardly. Don't just flippantly do something because it's not that big a deal and you're the king and who can complain anyway. Do it right. And plead the cause of the poor and the needy. Do your work well, son. Can you hear her saying? And then he's going to turn right around in verse 10 and he's going to say, who can find a virtuous woman? And it's interesting to me that the rebuke starts off with, you are not having very good relationships. And the whole rest of the chapter is this incredible, incredible chapter about the price of a good woman. And I can't help but think that if you take verse 1 and you take all of the rest of the chapter, it's almost like after he stops and starts thinking about it a little bit, he's saying, here's the prophecy that my mom gave me. I've been running around doing this and this and this and thinking my life was supposed to be about this, and then all of a sudden she brought me up short. She took me out to the woodshed and said, "What are you doing, son?" And I took one good, real close look at her and started to realize, wow, a good woman? And he writes the rest of the chapter. Impact that a mother can have on a child. Be patient, careful, and discerning about picking your spouse, and build a proper relationship, because that's the home that your kids are going to grow up in. Can you hear the advice of a mom to a king? And he's taking it. Value your mother's teaching. Go back to chapter 1. We ended the book. Now let's go back and start it. In the first few verses, we don't have a whole lot of mention about the parents. But it's all tied together here, because you have the Proverbs of Solomon. Solomon is known as what? The wisest man. And it's interesting because you would think about the richest king probably in the nation of Israel, son of David, guy who built the temple. There's all kinds of things that you could say about Solomon, but one of the things that just jumps right out at us is the fact that he was the wisest man that ever lived. And as he is writing this, he is giving us nuggets, one right after the other, some of them put together with a couple verses, some of them only one verse long. And he says, the reason I am writing this is that you can know wisdom and instruction and perceive the words of understanding. I want you to be able to live right. And then when he gets all the way down to verse 7 is where he starts in with the meat. And he says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You are not going to understand anything about knowledge until you begin with the fear of the Lord. And when he starts talking about where we get knowledge from, he starts with verse 8 and 9. Is that not interesting? Who gave you most of the fear of the Lord when you were 1 to 18? Your mom and dad. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. It's interesting that he chooses to use those two terms, instruction of a dad, but the law of a mother. I tell you, sometimes dads will put up with some more nonsense than moms will. They're running around, dad's like, you're going to have to calm down. They go by mom, she's got them by the ear. Sit. Now. Right? But the reason I wanted you to turn here, look at verse 9. For they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. Mom's teaching needs to be godly. It involves hearing, it involves understanding, it involves increased learning, it involves desire for truth. We get all that in the first 6 or 7 verses. And then he says, remember it and live it. Why? What is the big deal about what mom has been trying to teach me my whole life? It comes in verse 9. For they shall be an ornament of grace under thy head, and chains about thy neck. It will be valuable to you, and it will make you look good your whole life. Your whole life. You go to Walmart and you see kids running all over the place and they're tearing stuff down, they're bawling, they're crying, they're carrying on. Listen, sometimes kids have bad days too. I get excited when I see a mom roll the cart over to the bathroom and they disappear inside and they come out and there's a whole new child in the cart when they go down through the way. Sometimes moms and dads don't know how to deal with it because it's extremely public, and so they're trying to bribe their kids. I'll buy you this if you'll just shut up and calm down. And you teach them that kind of a thing, right? Do they look good when they're screaming their head off in that cart as you're wheeling through Walmart? Do they look good when they're a teenager and they've always gotten their own way and they're throwing a fit about every last little thing that's happened? No. When they're thinking about dating someone and they're taking somebody to prom or they're about to get engaged, do they look good to someone that is a potential spouse? When they behave like a spoiled child? No. When they go for an interview and they're sitting there and they show up 15 minutes late and their clothes are all untucked and they haven't combed their hair and they don't have any manners, and do they look good to an employer? Is the employer going, man, I really need to hire this guy. This is going to be a lot of fun. You understand how important it is? How do you tell a child when they're 3 and they want their own way and they're struggling, that 10 years from now you're going to understand what mom and dad were trying to do in your life, because this is going to be valuable to you and you're going to look good? Let's go back to the hot stove. How many times did your mom tell you not to touch the hot stove and you touched it anyway? You burnt your finger and you wish you'd listen. Listen. Later on in life, the consequences get a whole lot worse, don't they? It's important. Go to chapter 6 and verse 20. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 20. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Work at making them a part of you. I used to get cracked up. Some of the girls in our school, they'd be doing something, and you'd see some little 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grader come booking down the halls, and them girls would be getting aggravated and be going, hey, stop running, you're not supposed to. And then they turn around and whisper to the friend next to them, my word, I sound just like my mother. Yeah, it's true. And they meant it as a bad thing, right? They're like, oh my goodness, I sound just like my mom yelling at me. And then years later, you start to realize that it was a good thing because your mom was actually keeping you out of trouble and she was instilling something in you that was supposed to last your whole life long. Practical application every day, throughout the day, is what moms do. Chapter 3 and verse 3. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. Listen, how many times you have to tell a child something over and over and over and over again, sometimes before they get it? But some of the lessons that were learned the hardest and took the longest to teach are the lessons that last with them the most. That's exactly the concept that he's trying to get to right here. Value your mom's correction and teaching. Chapter 10 and verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. What a shame. See, moms want good for you, and it wears on her when she doesn't see that. Now, the problem with children is when they get to a certain age, they start making their own decisions and they start dealing with their own consequences. And that's a hard thing for a lady to have to deal with. It's a hard thing for a parent to have to deal with. But here you have a lady who has put a lot of time and effort into her child, and despite everything that she can do, here's somebody who is not making wise decisions. And so you have a weariness, a heaviness to mom. Why is it a heaviness to mom? Because it's not natural just to say, reap it. You make the decision, you live with it. That is a hard thing for a mother to do. Why? They have a little piece of them running around out there in the world. And it brings them great sorrow when that little piece of them is not doing well. Chapter 20, verse 20. I told you, little snippets all over the place. We are in the same book, but you got to do a lot of turning this morning. Whoso curseth his father or his mother, his lamp shall be put out in obscure darkness. Do not resent correction and the one that gives it. Boy, there are times I have heard some kids talk about their parents in the most awful way. When I was a youngster, I used to get so upset when I hear somebody say, my old man or my old lady. It's probably the closest times I've ever come to fighting in my whole life. You take it back, I'm going to shove this fist right down your throat. Your mom is sweet as sugar. Don't you dare talk about her like she's your old lady. Sometimes when we're corrected, we don't like it, and we have a tendency to lash out at the person, and God says, listen, you best not be cursing mom and dad. You have any idea what they have invested in you? You have any idea the hopes and dreams that they have for you, the work that they have put into trying to make you into something special? Don't you do it. Chapter 23. Verses 24 through 26. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. What's he saying right here? Listen, you need to learn from watching mom and dad. Now, moms and dads aren't perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But I thank God for a godly heritage, from a grandma and a grandpa who loved the Lord, and from a mom and dad who loved the Lord, and they made their fair share of mistakes. Everybody does. But I could watch them day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And I could tell what was important to them, most important to them, where they invested their time and where they invested their money and what they sacrificed for. Watch your godly parents and learn before it's too late. Chapter 29 and verse 15. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. There is a reason why we have to spank our kids, and it becomes very, very valuable the older they get. It might not be easy, Mom, but it is important. Value your mom. I was in shock a little bit as I started studying this about how many negative verses about a father and a mother there are in the book of Proverbs. Actually, I found it a little bit alarming for a while. But sometimes we don't learn everything from the positive. Sometimes we have to learn things from the negative. Go to chapter 15 and verse 20. It's important that you value your mom, not just on Mother's Day, but all the time. This verse deals with attitude. A wise man maketh a glad father, but a foolish man despiseth his mother. That's attitude. Man, I can't wait to get out of this house. People are always cramping my style. They won't ever let me have any fun. They won't ever let me do anything. Mom's always on my case about this or about this or about this. Can't stand her. What an awful attitude. Because I promise you, there's coming a time you're going to wish you could eat those words and take them back. Chapter 28 and verse 24. This is an action. When you do not appreciate your folks, you don't love your mom. Verse 24, whoso robbeth his father or his mother and saith it is no transgression, the same is the companion of a destroyer. You say, how in the world would you just steal from your parents? Well, you'd steal from your parents the way you'd steal from anybody else when you don't care about them. In Ephesians chapter 4, going over the 4 rules of communication, one of the things that changes is when you stop taking from other people and you start earning with your hands so that you can give to people that need it. That's because your attitude about them changes, and then your action about them changes. What about their demeanor? Look at chapter 19 and verse 26. Strong language in all of these warnings. He that wasteth his father and chaseth away his mother is a son that causes shame and bringeth reproach. I had to look up those 2 words because I was interested to see what they mean. Wasteth is a term that means to be burly, to be powerful, to oppress. So it's somebody who literally gets in their father's face and says, come on, old man, let's go. No respect at all. That's the demeanor of a wayward child. And the other verse is a strong word too. Because you look at this and you say, man, this person should really, really, really love and appreciate their mom. And it says, he's going to cause shame by chasing away his mother. And it's exactly what you think it is. It's put to flight for fear of safety. No woman in her own home should have to worry about whether or not she's safe, especially from the youngster that she brought into this world. That's exactly what this verse is talking about. A demeanor where there's absolutely no appreciation, no love, no respect for a mom. That's hard to imagine. But go to chapter 30 and you'll see why, I guess, there are so many warnings about this in this book. In verse 11 through 14, Proverbs 30, starting in verse 11, there is a generation. Now listen, if there's a generation of people, is that one or two? That's a bunch. I mean, that's characteristic of a whole group of individuals for a number of years. There is a generation that curseth their father and doth not bless their mother. There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes and yet is not washed from their filthiness. There is a generation, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There is a generation whose teeth are as swords and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men. And could I insert a verse there? Because if I was acting like that, my mom would be going, "Who do you think you are? Did I not teach you better?" And that's what happens at the beginning of chapter 31. Because you have a king who is running around and he's not acting like a king. And here comes a godly mom that says, "Hey, King Lemuel, what, my son? Are you supposed to be acting like this? Are you supposed to be doing these things? That is not the future that I planned for you." Chapter 23 and verse 22. How long do I have to obey mom? I used to get this question all the time, working with teenagers. How long do I have to listen to my mom and dad? I think I'm old enough, I've got my own job. I'm going to do. And sometimes with them, I would turn to this verse, because it's an important one. Hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. God's trying to say here, life is short, and you don't want to live it with regrets. Let's close with chapter 4 and verse 3. And a quote from William Dean Howells. He taught me also, oh wait a second, wrong one. For I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. You say, what is the difference between moms and dads? I think this verse describes it right here. Because here is a young man who is looking back on his childhood and he says, I was my father's son. That term is a special term, but you look at that situation and you say, I was my dad's son. Well, what was my dad trying to accomplish in my life? He was trying to make a man out of me. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to teach me at some point that, I have to be a good husband, and I have to be a good father, and I have to be a good head of the household. And hopefully, more importantly, I have to have a proper relationship with Jesus Christ, and I have to love him and serve him all the days of my life. What was my dad trying to do? Dad's trying to make a man out of me. Best he knew how. But look at the difference here in the relationship of a mother. It's kind of why Mother's Day is so special. I was my father's son, but I was tender and beloved in the sight of my mother. That term means darling. I was tender and her only darling. It's a tough thing to lose a parent. Every once in a while, something happens that reminds me of my dad. My dad's voicemail is still on my mom's phone. So if I call to talk to my mom and she doesn't answer, my dad answers. I can't imagine those of you that have already lost your mom or your mom and your dad. I just got to tell you, you better appreciate them while you have them. They are a gift of God, and children are too. Raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, because they will be valuable to them and will make them look good all of their life. William Dean Howells: a man never sees all that his mother has been to him until it's too late to let her know he sees it. Isn't that the truth? Sometimes when you're a youngster, you get so aggravated when they try to correct you, and you think you're so smart as a teenager, and you think you're so wise, and you think you're doing everything right. And then you become a parent yourself, and you look back and you think, oh my goodness, the grief I put my mom and dad through. But hopefully you'll learn to appreciate your parents. Love mom every day, not just on Mother's Day. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, you are a good, great, loving God. Every good gift and every perfect gift comes from you. And that's how I know that you love me, because you just keep giving good, perfect gifts to me. Your Son, Jesus Christ, to purchase my salvation and do for me what I could not do myself. My mom, to take care of me and teach me when I could not do for myself. My wife, to compliment me, help me, and do for me what I cannot do for myself. And Father, I pray that you will bless the mothers in here. Thank you for the hard work that they have invested in their children. Not every child turns out well. Some of them, like sheep, go their own way. It is heaviness and sorrow to a mom who has invested so much in their child. And we ask that you would bring them back, humble their hearts. We pray for the salvation of the youngsters in our church, that every single one of them will walk the streets of heaven and have a perfect relationship with you.